Pathfinder.
But MVP is not the one we're worried about, as they're just a setback here for TSM. Who is going to do it? TSM!
Bloodhound.
NRG for the 3v3 fight. Great shots being put in from Nathan, the MVP. He's going to do it. NRG is going to be your champion.
Valkyrie.
Victory. LG is out. Object game. Skittle Cage goes out as well. Zero's going to do it. Wide left flank. And just like that, Reignite is going to do it. They are your champions.
Seer.
But no shield break, as now the fight goes down.
So important that you get the damage here, and it's done.
TSM up in the skies. House goes down from the heavens.
And Catalyst.
This is going to be SAF versus TSM in the final fight.
Folklore once again. How? Once again from the heavens. Gets the opening knock. The hostile takeover. TSM.
All legends that have dominated the meta for a period of time in the history of Apex Legends Competitive. But what's the reason? Well, it's simple. They all at the time had the ability to see where the zone will go next. An integral tool that has changed hands in many ways over the course of Apex Legends history, and now goes by the name Ring Console. What's up everybody, Burke here back with another meta-analysis discussion, this time on the Ring Console. In this video I want to discuss specifically why the Ring Console information is so important and why it's controlled the meta so much over the history of Apex Legends Competitive. I want to talk about the overall impact that it has to early rotations and the flow of game in general, and overall discuss the balance of this tool in the game, how it affects the viability of other information tools, and how it can be used for POI and legend balancing. And then finally, I'll discuss ways to utilize the Ring Console to excel at the highest level. My goal with this video is to highlight the power that the Ring Console has over the overall gameplay in Apex Legends, as well as discuss macro as a whole and how you can use Ring Consoles, whether you have them or don't, to better your macro and have better rotations. I do want this video also to be an analysis on how the Ring Console could be nerfed or adjusted to have a better impact over the game and make the game overall more balanced. And with that, let's get into it. When discussing why Ring Consoles are important information for a team, for one, they affect early rotations. Ring 2 is half the size of Ring 1, which is pretty straightforward knowledge, but with the map knowledge like that, veteran players can use this to predict, with some margin of error, where the end zones will likely pull. Without this information, the potential end zones are not just doubled, but simply near impossible to predict. Without Ring 2, you can't rotate into endgames. You can rotate to other POIs, you can take isolated fights on edge, but you cannot get to end zone. Unless you take a shot in the dark guess, and you just happen to be correct, which obviously is not the kind of luck or RNG that we want in a competitive environment. This information allows teams to opt to reduce their time getting good loot in order to beat other teams to the best positions in endgame. This is, however, dependent on priority and proximity to end zones, which we'll discuss later in the video. But without this information, they do not have these options. And in a competitive environment, more options equals better decisions. The Ring Console also allows teams with more game knowledge and better macro to perform better. There's more information in the game. With or without Ring Console on their own POI, the team still has more actionable information than if the tool simply didn't exist. It increases the skill ceiling in competitive play when it comes to knowledge about the game. Ring Consoles also reduce the overall loot RNG for zone and flex teams. If you can get into good position, there's less need to get better loot. You'll need to fight less throughout the game, and assuming positioning is good, you really won't need nearly as much loot as the edge teams that have to fight more to take positions in end zone. It also affects the predictability in the game. In a healthy competitive lobby, you can know how teams will rotate based on the information they have access to. If a team is close to zone and has a Ring Console, it's safe to assume they'll leave their POI rather quickly. If they don't, then they may take more time to get better loot or opt to rotate to a POI that has a Ring Console. This is information that Ring Consoles provide even if you don't have one yourself, though you do need a controller class to see these consoles on the map. In terms of the overall impact that Ring Consoles have to the game, the existence of Ring Consoles ensures that roughly 9 to 12 teams will rotate to zone rather quickly. This is because 12 POIs get access to Ring Consoles in any one game, though some will just not be close enough to act on it. Some teams, however, won't have ring console, but will get information through other means to still get into end zone pretty fast, albeit a little more delayed. I'll discuss these methods in greater detail when I discuss priority later in the video. Ring consoles therefore allow edge play to be pretty healthy while guaranteeing healthy endgames as well. Without consoles, some teams would play zone with wild guesses, some teams would just opt to not leave their POIs until Ring 2 is revealed, some would take this stall in the game to take fights and increase their KP on unsuspecting or isolated teams, and everyone would basically be forced to play a variation of edge playstyles unless they committed to a guess where end zone was, and overall, their zone prediction just by chance was correct. Having the ring console in the game increases the knowledge ceiling for competitive players, and it saves weaker POIs in center zone. POIs like Landslide and Jurassic are just simply unplayable when they have no ring console. Even teams that play them now are just basically betting on the 60-ish% chance of them getting a ring console in any which game. Otherwise, their chances of succeeding significantly drop off when they don't have them. So now that we've established all the things that are good about ring consoles and the way that they can affect the game positively, what about them are harmful to the game? Some ways that the game become less competitive in regards to ring consoles are related to RNG. In a match, there will only be 12 ring consoles across the roughly 20 POIs. This means that about 40% of the time, you won't get one. Analysts, pros, and coaches discuss the difference in actual spawn rates versus perceived spawn rates, but since this information is more anecdotal, for now I really won't speak to any other percentages other than the straight 12 ring consoles out of 20 POIs. Regardless, if you don't get a ring console, the game has to be played completely different, which is not necessarily a bad thing to the game, as it does make knowledge ceiling in the game higher and makes macro more important, but because the spawn rate of the ring consoles on the POIs is hypothetically, or at least mathematically, the same across the board, even if they are remotely close to the same spawn rates as each other, this means that better POIs are getting every other benefit from their POI and similar console spawn rates despite their location on the map. On top of this, POIs that don't need them nearly as often are still getting them at the same rates. This is one of the biggest reasons we see overpowered zone POIs succeeding. Teams like TSM and Dark Zero have seen significant success out of POIs like Harvester, Lava Siphon, Mill, and Wall in the past because of their great loot and their priority rotations, but also because they had the exact same spawn rates with worse POIs that have worse benefits. The existence of the ring console merges playstyles. While I do agree that most teams should be prepared to play flex playstyles, where edge teams take advantage of close pulling zones and zone teams switch to edge with a farther zone pull, I do think there should be some risk to either playstyle. And purely or close to 50-50 flex playstyles should benefit only a few POIs that are on the map, particularly the better POIs in the center like Siphon or Pylon. The use of spawn rates could be a significant way to balance ring consoles in the game. Being closer to purely 60% chance across all POIs just serves as a tool for making already strong POIs even stronger. You get better loot, you have better rotations, and you get to zone first. I would balance the spawn rate of ring consoles to further represent the playstyles that exist in a given POI, and change the rate to reflect their reliance on the tool. This would mean making POIs like Landslide and Jurassic, which are specifically hard zone only POIs, having a 90% if not 100% spawn rate, and hard edged playstyles out of POIs like Dome, SkyWest, Climatizer, Thermal, Northpad, C-Note, or Coastal Camp being given a 10 to 20% spawn rate, as those POIs don't need console nearly as much as others, with obvious room for variation in all the other POIs in between. This would make different POIs more geared towards their playstyles and could be changed as a balancing tool throughout different seasons if needed, or if they desire different POI metas. Though it should overall balance out the POI meta more and allow for balance to make every POI more viable as spawn rates fluctuate. I also think for this reason, when making this balance change, it would be important to make the spawn rates known on the patch notes of the game so that each POI and each team looking to land in said POIs would know exactly what those spawn rates are going into the game. Now, obviously the math would still need to work out to have between 8 to 12 ring consoles per game. I'm not sure what the ideal number would be with this new change, but it would certainly make more POIs viable in competitive if done correctly. In addition, I think the viability of other information tools is equally important. And for that reason, I think making survey beacons similarly balanced on POIs in the reverse order would make it harder for central POIs to get information from a survey beacon, while making edge teams have more access to that information reliably. Even though they can be used to navigate past rotating teams in the early game, reducing survey beacons in the center of the map would mean that teams that are committing to playing zone playstyles would have to have better macro rotations and prioritize rotating quickly to avoid running into other teams, an important element of macro that is a staple to zone teams to begin with. Lastly, when discussing balancing for POIs and legends, I think introducing more controller legends is a really good way at balancing out Ring Console's effect on the meta to begin with. Season 20 did seem hopeful to diversify the amount of controller legends in the game, with Pathfinder and Vantage also now getting the ability to scan console, granted at the blue armor level, which means they'll never be fast enough to rotate to zone first. But we've seen this new Season 20 meta be pretty much a continuation of every other meta in the past, where pretty much one controller legend stands on top above all the others. I think a big part of this and a big contributor is the fact that there are only 4 legends that are under the controller class. Adding 2 legends that get the access to Ring Console at a blue armor level just simply isn't enough. While it is a step in the right direction, it's not an overall fix that something like adding another controller legend and balancing out the controller legend pool would do to help diversify. Though it is important that new controller legends have their own space in competitive viability, making sure they don't step on the toes of other controller legends, which is a pretty tough ask. Especially seeing how Catalyst came out and reduced the pick rate of all other controller legends for 4 seasons, and now we see the existence of Caustic making all other controller legends basically useless. Ultimately, I think giving this passive to controller legends was the right call. They just need more options in the class, and to keep all of them relatively balanced in relation to each other. But this is why using spawn rates would be an effective way to balance the legend meta as well. If you were to reduce the spawn rate of Ring Console on the edge of the map, then the teams on the edge of the map might not have as much need to run controller legends, and the viability for other legend classes would drastically shoot up. To summarize here, the changes that I would make to further balance the game in reference to the Ring Console and its effect over competitive integrity would be to affect the spawn rates and have them proportional to zone POIs versus edge POIs, and also increase the amount of controller legends being introduced to the game, as well as keeping them competitively viable in reference to each other. Now we've established the ways that the Ring Console is important to competitive integrity and the ways that it can be used to balance the game moving forward. In the meantime, here are the ways that you can use the Ring Console to excel at the highest level, and there are a few things that I think you may not know. When discussing how to use Ring Consoles to their furthest potential, the one thing that is most important to understand is priority rotations. Depending on the POI you land and a variety of factors, each POI has a certain level of priority. Priority simply means whether or not you get access to an end zone before other teams. Understanding priority rotations, there are 3 different types of priority in reference to the POI that you are landing in. There's high priority, low priority, and no priority. High priority is areas that if the ring pool's there and you have a Ring Console on your POI, you can almost always capitalize on it and get into an endgame position, simply due to the fact that you will beat other teams to that position first. Low priority are areas that you may sometimes be able to get into an endgame position depending on a few factors. And no priority are POIs that, despite any benefits you may have, you will never be able to get into a favorable endgame position on those POIs first, due to the fact that they are typically on the opposite side of the map from where you drop. Something like landing in Lightning Rod and an end zone pulling to C-Note means that you obviously will never be able to beat enough teams to that POI to get priority. It is simply just too far away to capitalize on. That being said, there are ways to increase how many POIs and areas you have access to in high priority. The ways to increase this are through legend selection and specific attributes of the POI itself. For legends, you can have legends with higher rotational utility, preferably something that is consistent like a Valkyrie ultimate. Getting the Skyward Dive means that you can simply go further faster, which means that the amount of teams that you'll be able to beat to that position will be significantly increased. There are also options like using Loba for grabbing evac towers both through support bins and through her black market, or something like a Pathfinder zipline if the care package alt regen was more reliable, which is a whole different topic, and I'm kind of surprised they haven't fixed that yet. In terms of things that are inherent to POIs, there's a lot of different things that can affect it. The location on the map and the rotational tools are the two biggest factors. If you're central on the map, then you have more directions you can go to. More directions equals more surface area in close proximity to your POI. If you're on the edge of the map, then you can only go at a max 180 degrees from the POI that you're starting at. Central POIs can go up to 360 degrees from where they start, which means that the amount of area in proximity to them is just higher. In addition to this, a POI having high ground means that you'll get more distance through things like Valk ults, evac towers, or balloons, which means that POIs like Command Center and Overlook are really good for zone play due to the fact that they can get further with rotational tools, which is where we get to low priority. Now, low priority is not exactly a priority itself. Low priority areas are actually either high priority or no priority. The areas that are covered in the low priority range are either in any given game going to be high priority or no priority. And this, in my opinion, is where the biggest skill gap in macro comes in, because there are factors that you have to consider after you've dropped off the dropship to allow you to determine whether or not this area is high priority or no priority. And if you guess wrong, you'll often run into a lot of issues on your rotation. Here are the factors that determine whether the low priority area that the end zone pulls is high priority or no priority. The first consideration is, do the teams between me and the POI that the end zone is landing have a ring console? If they do, they will likely get to the position that is optimal for your team to play out of before you. Or at the very least, you're going to run into them on your rotation to that spot. If they don't, then you may have priority to that area. But the biggest question is, can you get around them to secure the position? Things like balloons, evac towers, zip lines, tridents, Valk ults, and other rotational tools are the tools that you can use to surpass those teams. In addition, RNG is a big factor. Do you have a rotational utility to beat other teams in your path of rotation to those POIs? An example could be you found 2 evac towers and you have a Valk ultimate. Having all of those tools put together means that even if they do have that knowledge before you, you might be able to just beat them to the POI anyway without having to fight them. Legend picks factor into this. Do you know that the team in between you and them have a controller legend to even get the information? If a team in between you and the POI you're trying to reach doesn't have a controller legend, then it's safe to assume that they will not know that the zone pulls to that position, which means that you can pass them due to the fact that they'll likely be looting their POI longer or looking to take an isolated fight somewhere. Contests are another factor. If the team in between you and where the end zone is pulling have a contest occurring, it's important that you watch the kill feed. If the contest does not finish off drop, you'll likely be able to beat them to the position due to the fact that their contest will delay their loot and their rotation. In addition, it's safe to assume that if you're contesting yourself, unless it's over quickly, you are likely to lose priority as well to those positions for the exact same reason. Survey beacons are also an important factor. If you have access to a survey beacon, despite if all the other factors seem to indicate that you would not be able to take that endgame position, if you use a survey beacon on your rotation or even before that from your own POI, it may reveal to you a delay from another team that could give you the advantage you need to take a priority position. For example, it could detect an unhealthy lobby, teams taking weird fights, super close teams not taking positions in end zone, or just strange rotations. A team in between you and end zone rotating strangely or not rotating at all, especially if they are split from each other, which means that they could not use something like an evac tower or a trident, means that you may be able to surpass them to get to the position anyway, even if you normally would have been too delayed to do so. A survey beacon could also allow you to see a gap in the end zone, big untaken spots in the end zone that no one seems to be on their way towards claiming. If you notice these things and you have the rotation tools to beat other teams on the outside first, then you may be able to take advantage of this gap in playstyle. The big important factor here is that if you cannot ensure a safe rotation into an end zone, then you have a few options. You can either play an open position near the end zone that you know is available, or you can play as if you have no priority. This is when zone is simply too far away to play effectively. An example would be if you're in Zeus Station, you're not going to be able to get to a zone in C-Note Cave no matter how good your macro is. Once you've realized that you have no priority to a POI, then you have two options. You can either rotate and gatekeep teams on your side of the map that are playing edge, in which case you would find a good choke point that they are likely to rotate. This is often when you'll see rat plays happen as well. Or you have the option to play edge yourself, taking time, looting up, and rotating on the outside of zone, getting better loot, and taking isolated fights. It is for this reason that I highly recommend teams looking to improve their overall macro develop priority maps for the POIs you want to play out of. Include all the possible rotation tools at your disposal, positions you would like to play out of if you have priority, and where all ring consoles and survey beacons are on the map. You can use the tool ApexLegendsStatus.com to help you plan this out. Write out contingencies for where you will play if you're waiting on information, and the rotation paths you'll take, including looting your own POIs, so that you can take advantage of early rotates efficiently. If you're using ApexLegendsStatus.com, you can also use it to see how other pro teams rotate in Pro League out of your POIs. In addition to this, if you're trying to improve your macro and your end zone guessing isn't up to scuff, they have a ring guesser game on ApexLegendsStatus.com as well that'll allow you to play and guess end zones based on ring 2 information. Now that we've discussed priority, there's also one other factor we haven't discussed, which is what do you do if you don't have a ring console? Now, if you don't have a ring console, there are a few options you have that can still allow you to practice good macro and still get more information than other teams may have. For one, you can use survey beacons. If you have a survey beacon at your POI, don't use it right away, as even using it a minute after basically it has the same effect as a delayed ring console. Early zone teams will rotate within that time, and if you wait about that long and hit a survey beacon, the teams that have already left their POIs should quite literally point on the map where the end zone is pulling, simply due to the fact that their arrows on the map will show the direction they're rotating. Understand that you have now lost priority if you have waited this long to hit a survey beacon. At this time, you can play for either worse positions in end zone or potentially play edge if it pulls farther away. Look to your neighbors. If you don't have a ring console, you still get to know if your neighboring POI has a ring console. If you see a POI next to you pop an evac tower, a Valkyrie ultimate, or whiz by you on a trident, or take a balloon even, within a minute or two of landing, then it's safe to assume that they are rotating to an end zone that they believe they have priority to. If they're going in your direction when they do this, then it's possible you may have priority too, in which case you could opt to follow their general direction into an end zone. If they're moving away from you, it's safe to assume you have lost priority. Be prepared to loot up and play edge. If they are landing on you, then congratulations, you are the end zone. Find a spot you like and buckle up because you'll likely be there until the game is over. This is why if you don't have ring information or survey beacons to know where to play, if you are choosing to wait it out and you are inside ring 1, always wait in a potential god spot, at least until you are sure that you are not in end zone. That way you are ready for the long haul if the need arises. God spot does not necessarily mean center zone, but at least somewhere you can play out of for the long haul. In summary, the ring console is an integral part of the way Apex Legends is played. It affects which legends are used, the ways teams rotate, ensures healthy endgame lobbies, and directs the overall flow of game. It is absolutely not a perfectly balanced part of the game as it stands, with it basically necessitating the use of one of 4 legends and being a tool for making broken POIs even better. However, it does make the game better. It makes the game knowledge and macro important. It allows IGLs and coaches to shine with good zone reads and macro rotations. It allows for even higher skill ceilings and serves as the foundation for all of macro positioning and rotations in the game. It is a tool that is not likely to go anywhere soon, and hopefully this video showed you how to utilize this fundamental tool for maximum success at the highest level. So thank you for watching. Again, I'm Burke, covering all things in Apex Legends Global Series competitive meta. Recommend something you'd like to see discussed in a future video, and subscribe if you'd like to see more ALGS content, and I'll see you next time.